Shalom, everyone. Everyone have joined. What I'd like to do over the next 5 minutes is just give an overview of why I'm asking for your support and why I think it's vital for Israel that we succeed. And then I'll take any question you want about anything, politics, security, defense, health, personal problems you might have. Just feel free. So yeah, these elections are the first time that I'm presenting myself for to become Prime Minister of Israel. And I do this after serious thought. In the past, I always felt that Netanyahu was the right guy to lead Israel. I still very much appreciate much of what he's done. I no longer think he should be the person to lead Israel. And I'll just start with the bottom line. I think I'll do a much better job of getting Israel out of this chaos, tackling COVID, creating 400,000 jobs and uniting the people. I just don't think that he is going to be able to do any of this. And I think I'll do a much better job. And when I look right and left to other contenders, which are good people as well, Gidon Saar, Lapid, I think that they don't have at least currently, the competence and the qualities necessary to lead the Jewish state. And I think Israel right now is at one of its most chaotic moments ever. Things are grossly mismanaged. Pretty much everything you touch doesn't make sense. Every single aspect of life here, the education system is a farce. I don't need to tell you. The fact that for 10 months, Ben Gurion Airport was open without any testing, and now sort of in a manic depression situation from an open Ben Gurion with zero tests and massively importing all the various mutations and variants into Israel and creating this terrible third wave. Now they move to the other extreme, which is to shut down Israel totally, which is crazy. There's thousands and thousands of Israeli citizens that are part and parcel of Israel, and they're jailed abroad. There's no other term, and that doesn't make sense either. So sort of all the mismanagement of Israel has come to bear in this crisis, and we have to fix it. And it's not only about COVID. It's not only about Corona. We're in our fourth elections, and it's not because of Corona. It's because of mismanagement. We've got no budget for 2 years, not because of Corona, because of lack of leadership. The Negev is being taken over by some Bedouin criminals and terror. It has nothing to do with COVID. The whole housing situation is Israel, which for the past decade, prices have just gone up and up, has nothing to do with COVID. The very, very cumbersome and fat public system in Israel, public services are generally of low quality, very expensive, and the burden on the private sector is becoming less and less bearable. It's not about COVID. At the end of the day, we need to pull Israel out of this muddle. And the one thing I can say, I have very concrete plans how to do it on COVID, on the economy, on uniting Israel, on bringing back sovereignty to before we talk about Judea and Samaria, which certainly I believe we need to apply sovereignty. We need to start in Galil, in Lod, in the Negev, in Bnei Brak. We need to apply our sovereignty within our own cities, and all of this is not being done, and we need to do it. And that's why I'm asking for your support, and I think it's vital. This is not about some niche element. It's about the very ability to thrive. We can do this very quickly. What we need is good, competent, solid leadership. Put politics aside for a while, put our egos aside as much as possible while we are politicians, and bring Israel forward. I'll one very last point. I've not changed my principles by one iota. I will never give up 1 centimeter of Eretz Israel ever. We need to reform the judicial system, the justice system in Israel. We need to strengthen Jewish identity. And I see no contradiction between these values and what I think is the most vital and urgent task, which is to bring back jobs to Israel. And it's tough. And I'm being attacked that I'm so obsessive about jobs and jobs. Well, I admit that I am obsessive about jobs, because the leader of the Jewish people is first and top mission is to allow people to lead parnes, to make a living with dignity. And as a person of Tzionut Datit, I'm being attacked. Why are you talking all day about parnasa? I'm proud of it. That's exactly what Tzionut Datit needs to do. Look at the Torah. Everything's about parnasa. Abraham went to Egypt because there was hunger. Yaakov to Egypt. Boaz in Sefer Ruth. Why is Boaz? Why was he granted the big zchut that his great grandchild is David HaMelech? What is Sefer Ruth all about? It's about one leader who ran away and took care of himself during a huge crisis in Eretz Israel, and another leader called Boaz who took responsibility and fed people with bread. That's what Megillat Ruth is about, and that's why David HaMelech became a king. So I think dafka, I love that word dafka, which doesn't exist in English. I think dafka, as a person with a kippah, we need to be at the forefront of helping all of Am Yisrael. And it's not at the price of Eretz Yisrael. On the contrary, if we'll be there for Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael will always be there for us. 15 years ago in Gush Katif, the Tzionut Datit, the Kippot Srugot, asked, why were we abandoned? Why were everyone Kippot Srugot? Because we forgot that there's Am Yisrael. Well, I'm not forgetting that. So with that, I'll pass it over for questions. Bevakasha.
Thank you, Naftali. So the first question we have here is from Shui Haber. He asks, why should I vote for you for a fourth time?
You want to go ahead, Jeremy, and David Weiss. David Weiss.
You're gonna have to unmute yourself. You could
Okay.
to do it.
So I have a question. It's sort of a marketing question. I want you to be Prime Minister. I've supported you in past elections. However, I do not like the name of the party. My issue with the name of the party is by saying Yamina, we're a right-wing party, I feel like anyone who's sort of a center and left voter feels, this isn't the party for me. Have you thought about changing the name of the party? At this stage, it's a little bit too late, but how do you feel when people say, oh, this is a right-wing party? If I'm not a right-wing voter, I don't think I'm going to vote for this party.
Well, first of all, David, I appreciate the fact that you're always looking out for us. We are a right-wing party. It's important I don't want to, fake anything. I'm right-wing. I'm as right-wing as there is, but in this period, we need to set aside and understand that we need to sit with any party that supports a Jewish and democratic state that's willing to understand that at least for the next couple of years, we need to work on jobs, on getting out of this crisis, on uniting Israel. So, I'll take it into account, but I want to be very fair. I'm right-wing. That ain't changing. And one last point, I think the right-wing, that the way that, we try and conduct ourselves, and this is very deep, something that I got from my Abba, Zichro Livracha, Jim Bennett. My mom and dad made Aliyah from San Francisco. My dad had no gram of hate in him. He had a good eye, Ayn Tova. And so I sort of got that from him. And I don't hate people. So while I'm right-wing, I don't think that left-wing Zionists are less patriotic than I am. My friends in Sayeret Matkal that served with me, they love Israel just as much as I. And I support human rights and peace just as much as them. So we have a very different style, which goes deep, of not fomenting hate, even if we disagree. And I try, and very seldom will I use hate as a tool to gain a political advantage. We'll move on. Meira Lerner. There you go.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. Hi. First of all, I want to say I'm a big supporter of yours, and I hope to see you do great things in the next Knesset. I do want to ask, I'll just say I have a 5-year-old who, between Bidud and Seger, she's been home for almost 2 months now. And I see it's having just a horrible effect on her. And she's by far not the only one. So I wanted to ask you, is there a plan to not only overcome the challenges that these kids are going to be facing when they do eventually go back, and I hope that that'll be soon, but what's the plan to prevent this kind of thing from happening again, where kids are just out of any kind of environment or schooling for such a long time?
Meira, could I ask, as far as you feel comfortable, can you illustrate a bit more what sort of effects your daughter's having, just if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, I have to say, I think she's probably doing better than a lot of other kids her age. I've heard some really bad stories. For her personally, I mean, she's a kid that generally is on the shyer side. And I see now, even when I take her to the park just across the street, she has just a much harder time interacting with other kids, even kids that she knows. I see that there are certain anxieties with her that are becoming worse just because she's not in any kind of a real environment that's helping her with her development and things that she might be nervous about. Not to mention that she's hopefully starting first grade in September, and Gan Chova, it's there to really help these kids prepare for that, Hevded and that different environment, which is significant. And I feel like she's now missed probably more than 2 months if you take September into account of that time and preparation in that, comfortable incubator to help prepare her for that.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your openness, and I'm seeing a great deal of issues that kids are facing. I've got 4 kids, across ages, and we see what's going on. Every child obviously takes a different tack, and a lot depends on their or innate qualities, and lots of kids are fading away. and I am concerned. So I would say two things. I mean, by far, what we need is to get them back with kids. That ASAP. You know, all treatments, etc. Once they get back to normal and good interaction with other kids, many of the issues will be solved, and we will be dealing with leftover issues, but at least we'll know that we've stopped the bleeding. So there's two things. The first thing here, and I'm saying this very carefully after deep research, I'm one of the people who really understands pandemics now. I knew nothing about it a year ago. We need to clean Israel from COVID, and we can. And it's much easier and much more feasible than one would think. I know I'll get back to education in a second, Mira, but I have to explain the macro. If we don't clean up Israel, when we open up education, we're going to see a fourth wave, period. I'm a supporter, an avid supporter of the vaccinations, but it's not enough for two reasons. First of all, by definition, about a third of Israelis are not going to be vaccinated for the foreseeable future. Kids under the age of 16 and all the rest of the unique situations. And that's a big number. And now with the British variant, we know that kids do get infected at much higher rates. And we also know, and I have to be fair here, that some kids will have fairly severe symptoms that we don't know the full implications of those symptoms. We don't know, is it for life? Is it for a year? We just don't know. And that's a risk that I don't want to take. I'm talking about brain fog, cognitive impairments, muscles hurting. It's not a big rate. The percentage is very low, but when you multiply a low percentage on 2 million kids that potentially can get infected, it is meaningful numbers. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place. And that's why I think we have to move ASAP to the clean up Israel model, or zero COVID, which I've learned deeply. Israel is not the worst country right now, but we're one of the worst. We have more days of closure and shutdown than any other country in the world. We have a very high rate of infection per capita, and we were at the top quarter of death per capita. And our economy took a hit. So we're sort of really bad at everything except for the vaccinations. The second problem is the vaccinations may be bypassed by new mutations. History teaches us that there's a fair chance, I don't know if it's 20% or 60%, that tomorrow there'll be a new variant that bypasses the Pfizer vaccination, and then our whole national strategy crashes. That's why if we don't want to be at the mercy of praying that tomorrow there's no new Israeli mutant or a mutation or whatever, we need to take the initiative. We need to do what the best countries have done, and we can. What Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Vietnam, people say, oh, but we're Israel and we can't, we're not as obedient as they are. That's nonsense. Those are democratic societies, vibrant democratic societies. They have their own minorities. They have their own issues. Everyone's got a lot of stuff on their plate. The only one difference between them and us is they had very competent leadership. If I may, usually it was a woman leader. I'm not suggesting that men cannot lead well, but factually, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the President of Taiwan were very, very competent, very open. And here's the bottom line of what one needs to do. We need to take care of the points of entry and test people who want to come into Israel, multiple testing. And it's not that complicated. It's sort of like terror on airplanes. 50 years ago, terrorists blew up airplanes. So Israel put in a very good system where you go through various tests before you get on the plane. And lo and behold, it's been almost 50 years and there's been no hijacks since Entebbe. Yet people actually flew from Israel and back to Israel. So the same thing, we basically need to let people in, but not let the virus in. And that's easy. The second part is domestic within Israel. We need to apply, set up regions. And instead of focusing on the red areas, we need to clean up with massive testing. Today, we can do 2 million tests a day. We have the capacity. Just clean up the whole Galil within 3 or 4 days, and it'll be declared clean. And anyone who's found a positive will go to one of those Bennett hotels, a good hotel that you're not afraid to go to. And then everything opens up within that area. If there's a new infection, we very quickly clamp down on it. And people from red areas will not be allowed for a few days until they become green to enter those green areas. This is something, it's not an impossible model, and it also gives a huge incentive to take responsibility and on yourself. So, if you act well, you'll get rewarded. In terms of the education system, I think I'm so frustrated, I have to say, even within the wrong concept of running Corona, this could have been the most beautiful year. I put out a plan a few months ago of education outside, of doing tiulim in Eretz Israel. People, I don't think the academic loss is the problem. I don't care about it. You know what? It wouldn't be any disaster that for 1 year kids would learn less. They could volunteer in open areas. They could learn the history of their city. They could do tiulim all around Israel. Your daughter could do show and tell outside in the park. Israel has 300 sunny days a year. And on the not sunny days, they could stay home and do Zoom. So easy. We spent so much money. This was so easy to do, but we have such incompetent leadership. So bottom line, it's these sort of things that I would do immediately as Prime Minister. And here's a promise. And I very, very rarely make promises. If I become Prime Minister, within about 14 days from the moment I'm Prime Minister, almost 50% of the population of Israel will be in clean zones and their life will be restored almost as if it was before. Still, we'll need some various degrees. And within a few other weeks, we'll also clean up Bnei Brak and Tamra. But the point is that not everyone will be punished because of these areas. Thank you, Meir. I apologize, this was long, but I think it's important to explain this. Yeah. Now, Peter, there you go.
Mr. Bennett, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I'm also right-wing, both in Israeli and British politics, and still a member of the British Conservative Party. You mentioned earlier on that you'd invite people to discuss, if you were Prime Minister, personal issues. Baruch Hashem, I haven't got any of those. But how are you personally able to do that and to represent the people that will vote for you? Okay, that's my first question. My second thing, and it's not going to take long, is to tell you I do have a fair bit of experience in UK politics, and I have a lot of ideas that would help you, and I do believe in you. Jeremy's got my details. So perhaps after this, maybe you want to talk to him. But before we do that, perhaps you would answer my question: how you would represent the people who are actually going to vote for you and deal with their interests, please.
That's a very ample question, Peter. And first of all, I'd ask Jeremy later on to provide your details, because I'm curious always to learn about good other methods from other countries. It's been my MO, my modus operandi, in every job I've been since I was a commander in Maglan and a CEO in a high-tech company and Minister of Defense, Minister of Education. I believe in walking around, because walking around means literally going down to the field. I did this in 2014 during the war with Gaza, and I was heavily criticized. Why did you go and meet soldiers? Heck, of course I'm going to meet soldiers. And as Minister of Education, every week I would do a surprise visit. Here's a story I got to tell you. My first week as Minister of Education, so I had a tour, a visit in the north. Little did I know, I come to this school, I don't even want to tell you which city, and there's a long line of boys and girls with flags singing, and then we go through a few stations, and at the end, there's this nice, folk dancing or whatever. And at the end, there was a boy, a 16-year-old boy, who said, "Minister Bennett, we love our schools, the pedagogic or the learning methods here are very advanced, blah, 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 blah." Okay. I finished the meeting. I went to my car to ride out from that city. That same kid gave me a little envelope, get in my car, open up the letter, and he says, "Bennett, everything I said was a total lie. I hate this school, horrible school, bad teachers." and then at that point, I understood that whoever thinks that Tzahal is a hierarchy has not seen the Minister of Education. That's why I believe in bypassing everyone and talking to the people, listening. By listening, you actually can learn some good stuff. That's what I did with COVID. I had no idea about COVID, but during that period, every night from about 10 p.m., I would sit in the Minister of Defense office till I slept there. I brought, my own pillow from home. I told my kids and my family, this is war. I'm staying here on Shabbos, on everything. And from about 10 p.m. to 2 in the morning, I'd learn and read the new research, talk to my parallels in France and in Germany and in Taiwan. And that's how I figured out what we need to do, because you have to learn. So I promise to put in place mechanisms that will hold us accountable and force us to listen to the people. Okay, next question, Linda Yahbes.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you for taking my question. You had mentioned before that jobs is a big priority for you. It's one of your main priorities. We have entire communities in this country that working is not so much of a priority for them. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about getting them back into the workforce, or just letting them continue as they are, because it's a strain on the budget. It's a strain on the healthcare in the country, and it's an unfair balance. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Sure. Linda is obviously referring to the Haredi community in Israel, which a fair percentage of it does not work and doesn't pay taxes, though others do. I don't want to, tarnish everyone. So here's my plan. This is a very out-of-the-box plan. It's a bit unfair, but it's smart, and bear with me because it's counterintuitive. Some of you are not going to like it, but I ask you to bear with me. Here's the deal. The Haredim, to a great deal, do not serve in the army, and many of them don't work. Now, what has gained a lot of traction over the past 15 years is the fact that they don't serve in Tzahal. And people built careers on it. Yair Lapid built a huge career. Now Yvette Lieberman is building a career. You know, bash the Haredim, they have to serve. Now, should they serve? Yes. But here's the thing. If we sever that connection, if we cut the Gordian knot between army service and working, we can solve one of the two. And from my perspective, it's much more urgent that they join the workforce than they join the army.
That was my question. I didn't ask about the army, I asked about getting them into the workforce.
Absolutely. So here's my plan, which is 180 degrees opposite of what Lapid and Lieberman. What we're doing today is we're punishing ourselves twice, because the law today, the law of the land today in Israel, and it recently got updated, is the following. If a Haredi wants an exemption from the army, he needs to stay in the yeshiva till the age of 24, and it's recently grown apparently to 26. Now, the Haredim, what does Hared mean in Hebrew? Scared. Yeah, fearful. Haredi, ani Hared, I'm afraid. They're afraid of the army. So what effectively the Israeli government is putting a self-inflicting pain on ourselves, because we're forcing them to stay in the yeshiva until the age of 26, by which time they've got a big family. They're not going to get a good job. They won't get a good education. What I propose is, for the next 8 years, let Haredim be exempt of army service at the age of 21, at the early age of 21. And then what's going to happen? Some will stay in the yeshiva and learn Torah, fine. But I think the great majority of these young men that are not inclined to learn Torah are going to go out, get a quick education in software, in engineering, and whatever, and start working and pay taxes and not be a burden on us. And at no price. All we have to do is lower that exemption. Now, is it fair what I'm suggesting? No. Is it smart? Oh, yeah. Because I served in Sayeret Matkal. My kid is going to serve in the army. It's unfair, but it'll solve the problem. And that's exactly the sort of creative approach that no one else is willing to apply, and I would do it. I would do it for 8 years, and I think the social dynamic ultimately will be that many of them will ultimately want to send their children, get their children much better education, etc., etc. All right, we're going to continue with Eugene Berman. There you go, Eugene. Yeah, Eugene, I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Are we okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now.
Okay, my question really is a follow-up to your initial statement that the need to apply sovereignty within our own country. I couldn't agree with it more. I don't see a future for any country that doesn't apply sovereignty within its own country. My specific question is, how would you apply sovereignty to B'nai B'rach, Mea Sharim, and the communities that have shown a disdain for the government of Israel and are not complying with the rules of Israel?
Yeah, so what I would do is be fair and decent to everyone while applying the law to everyone. what Netanyahu did and was a profound mistake is that he caved in to the Haredim while others hate the Haredim. But that creates, once you create an opening, everyone says that's unfair. So I'm going to break the rules. If he broke the rules, I'm going to break the rules. And also there was a lack of a personal example from the leadership of Israel. Not only Netanyahu, sort of every, the famous Passover Seder. If you're very decent and fair towards the Haredim, you have the moral standing to apply the rule of law. But at the same time, you also need to use common sense. I just described my commonsensical approach to getting them into the workforce. My common sense approach in terms of COVID is not to send tanks into Bnei Brak. It's exactly what I said. Instead of focusing on trying to arrest some Admor in Bnei Brak, let's clean up the good cities, or the cities that are willing to clean themselves up, Haifa, Rishon LeZion, Netanya, and whoever is coming from a red city, whether it's Chiloni, Dati, Haredi, will not be able to enter a green city, and very quickly they'll come to their own leadership and say, hey, why are we mismanaging ourselves? I also want to clean up Bnei Brak. So very quickly, by using common sense and being decent, but also very clear about the rule of law, I would do it. And I certainly would not be in this situation. I view the Haredim as potential partners, but they're not the Baal Bayit. They're not the owners of the government. The owners of the government are the people of Israel, the citizens of Israel. I'll take two or three.
Can you make the changes you want with the ultra-Orthodox parties as a part of a coalition with you?
Yes. You need to be very deft about doing politics, but the answer is yes. It's a matter of generally, do you cave into pressures, or do you represent the citizens towards every pressure group? The Haredim are certainly not the only pressure group in Israel, folks. We've got monopolies, we've got very powerful unions that can hold our throats and shut down electricity or the ports. So when if you create a message that you're not caving into anyone, then it reinforces itself and vice versa. Unfortunately, the current leadership has shown that it caves into everyone. So it's not really governing. It's just caving in all day. Take three more questions. Yeah, there you go. Sarah. There you go.
Hi.
Sarah. Hi there.
First, I just want to thank you for everything you've done in all your years in politics. And I've been voting for you, and I plan to do so again. I just wanted to ask and touch upon the topic of housing, affordable housing. As a young person in my late 20s, 2 small children, trying to plan our future, and on relatively average salaries, and we're just not seeing how in the next couple of years that's going to be a reality for us. And if so, we've got to go to these kind of middle of nowhere communities to maybe think about affordable living, which is not something we're totally against, but I want to know what you mentioned it, what really is your realistic plan for that crisis, and that hasn't been done before, and it's something that's going to be something that we can really walk with.
Where do you currently live?
In Gush Etzion.
Gush Etzion. How many kids do you have?
2.
2. Good start.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. So I would almost say that the current housing crisis is un-Zionist. It's so profoundly unfair that young families that want to start their life don't have a chance if they don't have rich parents that can give them a head start. They don't have a chance to get a home. I'm a big believer that people have to work hard. That's also something my dad, Alav Shalom, gave to me, that you know, self-reliance. I'm not asking for gifts from the government. Here's what we need to do. A, break up that monopoly where the state of Israel holds over 90% of Israel's land, for heaven's sake. There's a monopoly. If tomorrow, you know, one group, one company would own 100% of the bread, then prices would also rise. So we have to break up that monopoly. Now, no one's been brave enough to do it, but that's something I do, something I do darn well. I break up monopolies. I broke up the asphalt, the cement monopoly. There was a monopoly 90 years old called Neshel. No one was willing to get near it because they had a lot of power. I broke it up in 2014, created competition. Prices went down. There was another monopoly called Tnuva in yellow cheese. I was Minister of Economy just for about a year and a half. I broke up and allowed import, and prices went down about 40%. I know it because I go to the Makolet in Ra'anana and buy yellow cheese, which I eat at 1 in the morning on my toast, which is bad. But I broke up a third cartel, not a monopoly, of higher education. Since the inception of the State of Israel, no private university was allowed. They were allowed to be colleges, but not universities with research. And I brought in the first one at Reichman against everyone. So first of all, we need to break up the monopoly, and we need to smoothen the process of planning, which is crazy in Israel. It's just freaking crazy. You can't get anything done here. So that's what I would do. I would try and achieve all of the legislation required within the first 100 days. I've got a very strong 100-day plan. And here's a secret. I've got very, very serious teams working on education, on housing, on economy, mostly on domestic issues, because what you don't get done within the first 100 days, sometimes will never get done. So I'm here to, especially by the most important thing I want to take care of is cut down bureaucracy and regulations. And we need to come with a bulldozer and just clean up a huge percentage. I'm not going to talk about how right now, but this I'm passionate about because I was a businessman and I know how quickly governments can ruin business, can slow down lives and ruin everything. So I'm adamant about that, of breaking up monopolies. I'll take one last question. Oh, there's so many. First of all, I have to say I'm thoroughly enjoying this discussion because you care. Everyone here that you know, everyone's been decent, asked real questions that concern real people, and that's something that we're lacking so much. You know, what I'm angry about is they don't care. Some of those people up there don't care. They just care about their own nonsense, about their own chair, their own ego, and that's wrong. That's wrong. You guys are paying my salary. I am here to serve you. I'm your servant. I'm a public servant, and folks forget that, and it's wrong. And we're going to fix it, Bezrat Hashem. One last question, Hana Nusemovici. Hana Baksha.
Nusemovici. I heard that the Israeli government spends 25% less on the education of an Arab child than they do on the education of other Israeli children. And I want to know, is this true? And what's your views of this? That's my first question.
So I have to say being pulled into another Zoom, so that'll be the question. The answer is no, but with a but, and I'll explain where it stands and what I'm doing about this. When I became education minister, I looked at the numbers, and it turns out that the government itself does not discriminate, but it turned out that there's lots of additional supplemental programs, like, you know, afternoon robotics or this or that, and a school that wants to take advantage of those programs that are worth money needs to apply. And then what I found out was that schools in the periphery, especially Arab schools, but not only, are less acquainted with the process to enter the, you know, to ask or fill in the forms to apply for those programs. So what happened de facto is exactly what you said, Hannah, happened, that, you know, schools in Herzliya or Rishon LeZion, the principals knew how to do it better because, you know, they're connected and all that. So their kids, ironically, got more. On top of that, beyond what the government itself gives every kid, and beyond these supplemental programs, there's the local municipality. Now, if it's a wealthy municipality, a solid one like Tel Aviv, so yes, the local municipality adds a lot, whereas poor municipalities don't have that money. So at the end line, bottom line, yes, you're right. What did I do about this? What I did was, well, on the municipality, fine. You know, I'm not going to tell a municipality not to invest in its own kids. But on the government side, I took all these supplemental bubbles and created one big bucket. You know, I sort of poked a hole and poured all the money into one bucket, and then actually distributed it by a push to the weaker areas. Because here's the bottom line. When I entered and I found out something that is horrible. In Israel, the quality of education and the future prospects of lives of a child that is born depends profoundly on where he was born, or she. Meaning, if there's two identical twins, one is born in Herzliya and one is born in Shlomi, the girl in Herzliya will get a much better education, have much brighter future. Now, I'm a free market person, but the basic of free market is everyone has equal opportunity, and that, what I just described, is horrible. So what I did, Hannah, was my first and utmost focus was getting the core sciences, math, English, physics, and which were sort of neglected. And you know, I was called Mr. Mathematics, 5 units. Let me tell you something. In the city of Shlomi, in Ofakim, in Chura, a Bedouin village, in the year I entered, 2015, the year before I entered, 2014, 0 kids did 5-unit math. What, are they less smart than kids in Herzliya or Ramat HaSharon? No. No one gave them opportunity. And happily, I can say that we doubled the rate of 5-unit math. It's not about the math, it's about the opportunity in Arab villages, in Kfar Chabad, in the periphery, because that's what I believe in. It's not about the money. It's about telling those kids, we believe in you. If you're willing to put in the effort and work hard to build your future, we're going to help you. And we did. And it's amazing. I meet these kids, suddenly unit 8200, you know, these very advanced technological units in the military. They're getting kids from the periphery, high tech. So this is beautiful. And I promise to continue this policy of giving an equal opportunity to every kid in Israel. As Prime Minister, I'm going to take care of every kid, whether he's Haredi or secular Jewish or Arab, I don't care. They're my children. They're my children. Whether they vote for me or not, they are my children. And as long as I'm leader of Israel, they're going to get an equal opportunity. What they do with it, that's up to them. Chaverim, I want to thank you a lot. I feel that this is way, way too short. And maybe later on we'll have another one. Here's what I ask. This time it's not a game. It's not a nice to have. You know, let's add a bit of salt to the main dish. No, we're fighting for Israel. We're fighting for Israel. We're fighting for 1 million people who need a job, terribly need a job. We're fighting for those kids who are fading away in front of the Zoom. We're fighting to prevent thousands and thousands of Israelis from carrying long COVID for the rest of their lives because of incompetence, gross incompetence of this leadership. We need to change the leadership. I don't hate Bibi like others do. Others hate him. I don't. I respect him. But it's time to say thank you, Bibi. Hand it over to Bennett. And together we're going to, Be'ezrat Hashem, do a good job for Am Yisrael. Thank you very much. I ask you all to persuade everyone to vote Bennett, vote Yamina. We've got an amazing team with Ayelet Shaked, with Alon Davidi, an amazing mayor of Sderot who took a city deep in crisis 7 years ago. And amidst all the Qassams from Gaza, he built a huge success. That's exactly, we need these young, energetic, entrepreneurial people. We don't need more recycled politicians that move from 17 parties. We don't need that. We need entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, businessmen, people who actually know how to do stuff. Toda rabba, erev tov. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naftali. I'll take a few last questions since I know there are a bunch of people who are upset they haven't gotten a chance yet.
I would have wanted.
All right. Let's pick Rachel. Rachel, are you here? I guess she is not. We will go on to the next person. Who do we have here? Hannah.
My question is about monopolies, and Mr. Bennett spoke about destroying monopolies. He didn't mention the import monopolies. I think there are only 2 import companies in Israel. Is that true?
Well, I can tell you that during Minister Bennett's time at the economy minister, rather between 2013 and 2015, he was able to break down a few of the monopolies. When it comes to importing, the major thing that he dealt with was the National Standards Institute. He had, going in, realizing that there was this situation where we had a lot of protectionism of everything being imported, needing to go ahead and deal with a certain standard. And many times he found that the standard was specifically tailored to either a specific person bringing it in as an importer, or a specific company that afterwards ended up getting it once it got out of the ports. What he was able to do, again, as he mentioned, he was only economy minister for about 1.5 years. He was able to cut down 1/3 of the standards that were existing at the time in the Israeli Standards Institute. He was also able, with certain items, to be able to go ahead and really allow various international standards, such as American standards or various European standards, which are no less safe than Israeli standards, I'll tell you, in order to be able to allow more companies to be able to come in. So in terms of the number of importing companies, it depends on the product. It could be the product you're talking about specifically only has 2 different companies that are bringing it in. One of the things he was able to do during his term is to be able to go ahead and reduce that regulation. If he would have had more time, he would have been able to do a lot more. Of course, some of the regulations are necessary because of various safety reasons and procedures, But what he was able to see, and of course, like I said, he eliminated a third of them, is that most of them really had absolutely no reason other than choosing winners and losers in terms of why they were even put there in the first place. Let's see who else we have here. David. David?
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. My question was to the minister, but we ran out of time. How's he going to deal with Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah?
Well, I think that if you look at his term as defense minister, of course, it was only 7 months. But if you look at his term versus the previous terms, and you saw the activity that was in Syria, you saw the retreat of a lot of the Iranian forces from the region. I would say that people forget this, but it was during Bennett's time that Hamas decided to stop with the fence protests. They stopped with a lot of the activity in terms of things that they were trying to do to push the envelope. I'll put it this way. If you go ahead and you look at the 7 months in which Naftali Bennett was defense minister, and you cross-check that with the year plus that Netanyahu was there, or Lieberman's term, or Yalon's term, or really a majority of the people that we're looking at since the Second Lebanese War, I think it's quite, the results, I think they speak for themselves.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, David. Who else do we have here? Ozer.
Hi, how you doing? Erev Tov.
Great, Erev Tov.
Okay, so this is my question. My question basically is, I got friends across the spectrum, okay, like most Israelis. And if I want to explain to my friends the Yamina platform in 4 or 5 concise bullet points, okay, what would they be?
It's pretty simple. We need to go ahead and get Israel out of the chaos. We need to actually have a plan in terms of what to do with Corona that has to do besides the vaccinations. Right now, that's all Netanyahu is saying. He's banking everything on vaccinations. What happens if the next mutation is something that is able to bypass the Pfizer vaccine? There's just no plan in place, right? So the number one bullet point is to be able to stop the chaos and defeat Corona. The second thing is to go ahead and create 400,000 jobs. You know, we have a situation where we have over 1 million people who are either on chalat or they're completely unemployed. We have to go ahead, we have to create jobs again. And the third point would also be to go ahead and help small businesses. The reason we're running on a joint slate with the Shulmanim, which are, a bunch of small business owners, is that, I can tell you also as someone who owned a business myself, it is a very, very, very difficult thing to be able to meet all these regulations. He's gone ahead and put a lot of things in place to be able to go ahead and make it a lot easier when it comes to these issues. A fourth issue is that we have to go ahead and heal the nation. One of the great things about Naftali Bennett is that he is the only player in the political arena that is not being boycotted by any of the key players, and none of the key players are in a situation which we would go ahead and boycott them either. So he's really the only one who's in a unique position after 4 elections to be able to pick up the pieces and somehow create a government out of this complete mess, instead of just repeating this over and over and over again until we get to the 20th election in 2030. I think those 4 are the most important. If you want to have a fifth thing, so obviously we're having this conversation in English. If your friends happen to be Anglos, so again, we're the only list that decided to have an Anglo candidate in a realistic spot for the next Knesset. So if you want to be able to have an address of someone who can actually speak your language, both literally and metaphorically, we're the only ones that are going to be able to give you a chance to have a representative that will represent those values.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Sure. Let's see who else we have here. Rena.
That's my wife's name, but I'll stand in substitute.
That's okay. I'll take your
That's all
question
right.
too, sir.
Thank
What's
you
your
for
name?
calling on me.
No problem.
Stephen,
Stephen.
I'm very concerned about the Biden administration and the fact that they're going to fall lockstep with the former Obama onslaught. I'm wondering what Naftali's posture or strategy will be once the Biden administration puts pressure on us and allies itself with the Palestinians who are going to step up their violence in order to get Biden's attention and put pressure on us to do things. I wonder what strategy, Tanya,
just a
Mr.
few
Bennett
days ago,
is going to adopt. Is he going to cave? Is he going to
no,
cave?
I'll explain to you
appease them?
exactly. A few days ago, Naftali addressed the Council of Presidents back in the States. And of course, this is, the main question that came up in terms of the Q&A, in terms of what's going to happen with the Biden administration. Look, Bennett is not a new kid on the block anymore. He's already been in politics for over 8 years within the Knesset as a minister and within various positions of government. We were around during the Obama years. I know that a lot of people, I see it says there's a problem with the connection. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Nod your heads. Yeah, okay.
We can hear you now. You broke out for about 5 seconds.
For 5 seconds. All right. If it was only 5 seconds, we're great. So again, a lot of people have a great memory of the last 4 years and the great things that happened in terms of promoting Israel's interests. But Naftali Bennett was around also in the Obama administration as well. And a lot of people that are in the Biden administration were around during the Obama administration. And we've already seen a lot of work that was done in terms of being able to stop at least an initial entering of the U.S. back into the Iran deal. They said that there would be some sort of dialogue. That's something I think we can all agree is an improvement. We also saw in terms of the adoption of the definition of anti-Semitism, which of course virtually everyone within the Council of Presidents had adopted that same thing. So again, we talked to the Biden administration just like we talked to the Trump administration, the Obama administration before that. If there's anything that we can see based on what we've had since January 20th, is it doesn't seem like the Middle East or Israel is at the top of the Biden administration agenda. And perhaps that will mean there's a lot less pressure, a lot more stuff going on behind closed doors. But I don't think that a lot of the fear and a lot of the specific, what would I say, concerns that I've seen raised by various politicians and other parties, I'm not so sure that those are warranted. And I'm not so sure that we need to go ahead and at the same point, not do anything. But I think that for sure going ahead and in a public forum, making any specific declaration to that point will not be something that will be helpful. But like I said, I don't think that we need to be as concerned as a lot of other people think we should be. I hope that answers your question, Stephen.
Well, I hope you're right. I'm just wondering if the pressure does come, what the posture of Naftali is going to be.
I think again, if people have seen, go back to Naftali's behavior during the Obama administration and tell me if that's a person who stood his ground or if that's a person that got pushed over. I think again that Naftali's record speaks for itself. I think there's a reason why he's respected by people in both parties. And I think there's a reason why we have I would say, be cautiously optimistic compared to a lot of the concerns that we've heard from various individuals from other parties. And, I'll put it this way. Just as you have people in the foreign arena, I think Naftali stood very strong against people in the domestic arena as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Stephen. All right, who else do we have here? Gabriel.
Unmute, can you hear me?
Yes, I just took you off mute, so now everybody can hear you.
I switched off. You may have noticed what the question was, but in general, look, I've lived in this country for well over 50 years. Before that, I was active politically as a student and graduate. Unlike probably most people here, I was a Labour Party supporter because in those days, the Labour Party of Hugh Gaitskell and specifically Harold Wilson were great friends of ours. not like today, or certainly not like with what we've seen going on with Corbyn and so forth. It went together with my philosophy, Zionist philosophy of Hapoel Mizrach, Forever Avodah. These things combined brought me to Israel with my wife before the Six-Day War. So I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of things going on in this country. Some of them I'm happy about, I'm certainly happy about living here. But I'm a little fearful. I've now got, Baruch Hashem, 8 great-grandchildren. What's going to be with the political system that we have to put up with in this country, where you can never get a solid government because it's always got to look for coalition partners who are pulling in the other direction.
You know,
something be done about this.
So I think what needs to be done about this, and I said this in my opening remarks before Naftali came, if you were around, and I also said this in response to another question, that this is really the big issue. The big issue of this election is, why are we in a 4th election in less than 2 years? And the reason is because everyone is boycotting everybody, right? We're in a situation where some people won't sit with these people, and these people won't sit with the other people. And we're in a situation where if everyone is telling the truth, we're going to have a 5th election and a 6th election and a 7th election and an 8th election. And we're just going to keep going on and on and on and on. And that's why this needs to stop. It needs to stop. I really believe that Naftali Bennett is going to be the person who can actually go ahead and form a coalition here. And as I said, the reason is because he's the only one who's not boycotting any of the key players, and none of the key players are boycotting him, right? There's a lot of anger of people in Likud with Gidon Sa'ar. I don't see any connection there. There's a lot of issues in terms of what a lot of, how can I put it? The options that Yair Lapid has for a coalition are a lot more restricted than the options that Naftali has. The options that Netanyahu has is a lot more restricted. He's just the only one who can do it. And again, everyone knows what it is that we stand for. And if you don't know what we stand for, we're here to be able to tell you that and to make sure that our positions are clear. But our positions have not changed. And what we need to do is be able to have someone who's responsible, who's able to go ahead and form a coalition and get us through this process. You know, I hear a lot of people, you said you're from the Labor Party originally. I hear a lot of people, and we saw some of the questions tonight, of people are saying, well, why don't you push sovereignty in this election? Guys, we're in the 4th election in 2 years. Does anyone really think that we're going to have some sort of right-wing majority at the end of this process? This is just not something that's in the cards. Are we in a situation where we don't all know people who are stuck at home? We don't know people who suffered from corona. We don't know people who ended up in the hospital, who some of us maybe know, at least I do, people who lost the battle to the virus and are now 6 feet under. I mean, where are we living in where the main issue that we're dealing with is not the coronavirus and getting this country back to work? You said you have great grandkids. You want to make sure that they have a future. You want to make sure that they don't grow up thinking that this is normal. If we have the current government continue in place, what's going to happen? We're going to continue to have a situation where the citizens of Israel go to sleep at night, not knowing what the policy is in the morning. That's just a ridiculous situation. We can't live like that. And with all due respect to the other people who are running for prime minister, what is their plan? Why will they not actually put pen to paper and explain? If you want to go ahead and say Naftali's plan is bad, explain what is your plan. So again, I hope that he's able to go ahead and form the next coalition. But regardless, if we just keep doing what we've been doing until now, I really cannot even promise you that we won't do this all over again in a few more months.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for your question. Next, Ziv, is that Ziv Doron? Let's see if you're here. I'll just take a couple more and then yeah.
It's Doron Ziv. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I can't see much difference between Gidon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett. I think they're both very capable, and I think they're honest, which to me is very important. However, Sa'ar has had the courage to say he will not continue the reign of King Bibi, and he would not, under any circumstances, enter a government which either includes or is supported by Itamar Ben-Gvir. Comment.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. I think that might be one of the most important questions of the night because I hear it all the time. I think the amount of emails we've got that have to do with this question are probably beyond every other question. The key difference between Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett is Naftali Bennett was in opposition to this government, and Gideon Sa'ar was a member of this coalition government. 8 of the top 10 people on Gideon Sa'ar's list all happened to be members of the coalition government. If they were ministers, if they were committee chairs, whatever their positions were, their voting record is identical to that of the prime minister. And they can talk about how much they spoke up in the committee and gave a great speech. But in the end of the day, when Naftali Bennett voted against, or people in Yamina voted against, they ended up voting for, and they went ahead with Netanyahu and his policies. And I'll say something that might not be a popular thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do. Gideon is a good guy. He's a good guy, but he needs to be able to give a good answer about why it is that we should not expect him to be the next Moshe Kachlon. What happens when he falls down to single digits? Every single poll, he's losing another seat and another seat. His entire party was, again, people who sat in this coalition. What's there to tell you that he's actually not going to go ahead and join a Bibi government and give a whole speech about why there's a national responsibility for him to go ahead and do so, despite past differences? Or like Lieberman said, that you know, the shu kitzer taptil, you know, I'm just saying, Gideon is a good guy. I just don't believe him. I don't believe that the guy that voted with Netanyahu and only left his first committee position at the end of October and only resigned when it was clear that there was not going to be a budget and we were going to go to new elections. I just don't believe him when he says he's not going to sit next to Netanyahu. When you have interviews from just 2 months ago with him criticizing Bennett and saying that Netanyahu is a great prime minister, I'm very happy that there are a lot of people that feel he's very courageous, that he goes ahead and gives a speech and says that enough is enough and he's done with Netanyahu. But I'm just wondering, where was Naftali Bennett this last year and where was Gideon Sa'ar? I hope that answers your question. Who else do we have here? Lily, Zev, and then I'll wrap things up.
I'm another one of these. It's my wife's account. But,
that's cool. What's your name?
Tommy.
Hey, Tommy.
I'll send regards to Nata for you.
Thank you.
My neighbor. I am going to take it in a slightly different direction. I'll say already that I feel that in general, in a normal year in this country, our taxes are too high. And especially this year, I don't know what the heck we're paying for because we've done nothing but sit in the house. But as an American, I'm double taxed on everything I earn. You know, if I thank God I'm able to make some money in America, I pay taxes on it there. I pay taxes on it here. Any investments that I do there, I pay taxes on it here. Sometimes I can't even invest in certain things because as an Israeli, I'm limited in what kind of investments I can get into, IRAs, what I'm allowed to be a part of or not allowed to be a part of in Israel. Is there any potential for any sort of tax treaty, any sort of relief on this that we can look at or look forward to?
That's a great question. I'd say that's a question that comes up just about in every election. For those of you who don't know, when I signed candidacy papers, so I had to say that if I am privileged to serve you guys in the next Knesset, that I have to go ahead and give up my American citizenship, and then I wouldn't have a lot of the issues that I know a lot of you guys have. I know my father, Zichrono Livracha, was always having to deal with these issues of double taxation as well, and the various regulations that are in place, and the Social Security and the Bituach Leumi and so on and so forth. And we've been going off this old, tax treaty with the states going back from the 70s, and it's really outdated. So again, this is something that we're aware of. This is something we tried to work on in the past. you need to be able to go ahead and be able to move this forward. You have to have a real willingness on the American administration to be able to move this forward. I had a lot of high hopes that we would be able to get this stuff done over the last administration, since of course it's no secret that we had very strong ties between the two governments. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. I can tell you that this is going to be one of the number one things that, if again I'm privileged to be able to deal with, that I'm going to try to go ahead and help you guys out with. I'll tell you, just for contrast, for Lieberman, he was always dealing with the issue of the pensions that those coming from the former Soviet Union were not recognized here. I can tell you, when I think of my mother, who also, she made Aliyah, right? If you don't have enough quarters in the States, and then you don't have enough years over here, and then you're in the worst brackets on both sides. In certain cases, you can end up in places where you don't end up even qualifying at all, despite the amount of money that you've paid in for years after years. So this is something where, again, it's close to my heart, dealing, with it as an American citizen, dealing with it, with my parents, and just someone who's been in on a lot of conversations, whether they were more formal or informal within the MK cafeteria. And one of the things I can tell you is, if you give me the power to be able to pursue this issue, like I said, this is going to be one of the things at the top of my agenda.
Excellent.
Sure. All right, I said I'm going to take one last question, and after that, I'll wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for sticking around. Zev, you're up. Hi, Zev. Can you, no, let me try to fix that again. Again, I thank all of you for dealing with the various technical difficulties we dealt with. That's what happens when you deal with the first Zoom event, right? So you guys are, I don't want to say that you're guinea pigs, but we did experiment here on you guys, and the lessons from this Zoom will be applied to future Zooms. I've unmuted you again, Zev. Hopefully you can now speak. You cannot speak. I feel bad for you. Can you write in chat, maybe? There were a number of people who asked me in chat. Everything that was said in chat has been saved. This session has been recorded. We'll be able to get that stuff out. This is a good time to also say, if you have any specific question, you can send it to naftalibenettenglish@gmail.com, and our team will be able to get you an answer in English. Zev has asked the question. The question is, I just wanted to know, what was Bibi's answer to the debate? For those of you who might not have seen, and this was pretty fun, less than 2 hours before we started the Zoom, Naftali Bennett put out a video in which he challenged, Naftali Bennett challenged the sitting prime minister for a debate, as a lot of us are used to from the US, UK, and many other Anglo countries, in which the challenger asks the incumbent to be able to debate the issues of the day. And we've not yet got a response from the prime minister. I am not so sure that we should be holding our breath. But I think it's amazing. This is the first time ever Naftali Bennett is running for prime minister. I think that those are, again, the types of values that we're used to from Anglo nations, that if someone wants to go ahead and have the job, that he actually challenges and asks the incumbent to discuss the issues of the day and to discuss the policies. I think it's difficult when Naftali is, again, he's literally written the book in terms of what he wants to do, and Netanyahu is not really giving us a clear indication of what it is that he wants to do. I could understand why he might want to skip that television debate. Zev asked a follow-up question about, what about challenging Lapid or Sar? Let's first see, and if Netanyahu actually goes ahead and responds to that. I'll be honest, I don't know why Lapid or Sar didn't challenge Netanyahu either. I remember when Naftali took place in a debate in 2015 they had on Channel 2 back then, of all of the top parties, except for Netanyahu and Herzog, who both decided in 2015, because they were the leading candidates, they did not want to go ahead and do so. So I don't have an answer for you on that, but let's first see what Netanyahu has to say. So once again, I want to thank you guys all for for sticking around till the end. I want to thank you for your questions. I want to thank you for listening. As I said, if you have additional questions, please send them to naftalibennettenglish@gmail.com. And my wish, for all of you guys, of course, is to come out and to vote for Yamina so that Naftali Bennett is able to successfully take us out of the crisis that was caused by this current leadership, and also so that we're able to get an Anglo representative into Knesset. I think that would be the best thing for the community, because after having some really great representatives in Dov and in Michael and Yehuda and Michal, we run the risk of in the next Knesset not having anybody. So, I don't want to give a Star Wars reference of being your only hope, but if I do have the privilege to be able to go ahead and represent the state of Israel in the Knesset, it's quite clear, I believe, to everyone that my main focus will be being an address to all of you guys. So thank you once again, and I wish you all a good night.